Thank you. It's good to see you all here. I started my career as an academic. I taught a little bit and was sort of a junior dean type. And I always loved getting back on campus because you see the energy, you see the enthusiasm. It's also good to be here in the Rome Commons ballroom. I realize I'm getting old when all right, how many people here knew Lou Rome? Yeah, that's what I thought, a couple of them. Lou was a great guy. He was a state senator, he was a lieutenant governor, and a very skilled politician and had a great sense of values. And he would always tell you that you know you've got a great event when you got standing room going on. He'd be pleased to see a building named after him being used for this purpose. There are a couple of chairs down here for those who want to be brave enough to come on up. My task this morning is just to kind of set the scene. My brief time I've got, I can't get into great depth, but maybe I can provoke you, raise some issues, put some things in perspective, because you've got a great day ahead of you. The starting point, talking about cybersecurity, is that it's a threat. It's a serious problem to everybody, all of you, Connecticut, the United States, your community at every level. And it can rob you of your identity. It can shut down your public utilities. It can steal your money, take proprietary information. And yet, despite all that, we as a country are still somewhat apathetic about our defenses for cybersecurity. And this is going to seem ironic because you got all these people in this room who really care about it, but among the most apathetic, the most difficult to take serious action to protect themselves are universities. It's tough. You got a constantly changing population. Every 4 years, the whole brand new, every year there's several thousand new players come on board. It has massive dependence on digital work, and it's got a lot of information that's valuable. All the medical records, all the personal identification have got to be protected by the university, and it's valuable. Steal it and you can sell it. Also, having been one, I can say this, I guess, but the words faculty and discipline don't usually end up in the same paragraph. Let's just put it that way. I mean, it's hard to organize a university system to take the kinds of steps you need to do to protect yourselves. And students are largely oblivious. I mean, it's like getting your flu shot. I mean, it's something you ought to do to take care of all this, but we're lax, and that's understandable. The problem is that if you understand the consequences, you become a little less lax, and that's what we got to do. We got to understand that the costs of a cyber penetration are enormous. We all got to tighten up. All right, how do we get here? How did we get to the point where we got a room full of intelligent, interesting, competing people working on a problem? How did it get here? Well, there's a thing called DARPA, which is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. It's a skunk works at the Pentagon. And they think of new things to do. One of the things they thought of to do was to have a way to communicate between the military and academics in case of a nuclear war when you couldn't call everybody up on the telephone. So they created the internet. It was done among trusting people who shared the same values, the same country. It was instantaneous. It could handle vast, large amounts of data and get to everybody at the same time. And it spread. And now the digital world permeates everything we do, from not just communication, but management, taking care of data and so forth. And everybody is using it all the time. Even as I'm speaking to you now, I am competing against smartphones, which all of you have where your computer is open, and I'm trying to get your attention against the digital world. I mean, it goes on all the time. So, but the world is no longer a trusting community. Those professors and military officers who launched the internet, it's no longer their world. It's everyone in the whole world. And I don't want to, cast any aspersions here, but there are bad guys in the world. And there are people who will steal your money. There are people who would kill you on sight. I've dealt with them in my time in national security. They would do anything they possibly could to bomb this room and wipe out this whole university if they could. I mean, when you see desperation and evil and ideological hatred and everything, who have a weapon, it sobers you. You realize that they will use it. A few of the obvious examples, in addition to national security and all that, are financial incentives, proprietary information, and of course the national security. All right, a word about financial incentives. What's valuable? personal medical records. There's a market for them. And it varies to supply and demand. Give a little economics lesson this morning. Our recent price I heard was about $50 a medical record. Now, nobody's going to stand out here on a hillside with a medical record saying, anybody want this thing for 50 bucks? But if you have 10,000 of them, and you can sell them to a chop house, which is going to use them and market them and infiltrate them, yeah, you can get a lot of money for them. Who has medical records? Yukon does. The town of Mansfield does. The state of Connecticut does. Obviously, our insurance companies do. Personal identification, Social Security, name, rank, serial number, date of birth. All those are bought and sold on an open market. They are valuable, and that's why people try to get them. Anybody who possesses that information is a target. The state of Connecticut has over 1 million tax records, and the same number of people are registered in social service. So you got, sometimes there's an overlap, but you think of a million records, which 1 million times 50 bucks, after a while it gets worth trying to get into that and take it over. And that's why people do it. They do it for the age-old reason of trying to make some money. Cyber theft, just cyber theft is the fastest growing crime in the world. It wiped out more than $52 billion of wealth over the past 3 years. Ransom demands grew 36% in 2016. 7.5% of all households in the United States reported some kind of identity fraud. I think the reporting rate is about 50%. So my point is, over 10% of all households in the United States have some kind of identity fraud. Now, proprietary information. If you were a nation seeking to develop an advanced weapons system, you could do the hard work that we did in the United States to develop it, or you could steal it. And it's a lot easier to steal it. And it has taken place. The Chinese are especially active in this area. What have they stolen? Well, here in Connecticut, we care a lot about the F-35, right? We put the engines on it. The Chinese have stolen the plans for the F-35. They've stolen the plans for the Black Hawk helicopter. They've stolen the plans for the Aegis anti-missile defense system. And that's the start of the list. I'm just trying to get your attention. My point is, no one is safe today. They have penetrated our intelligence agencies. They have penetrated the White House. They have penetrated the Defense Department. If anyone decides to put resources into it, anything is penetrable. And that's very sobering. We live in a vulnerable age. Talk about national security for just a moment. Cyber is a weapon. It can be used just like the Air Force, the Navy, or the Army. I mean, Chairman Dunford, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said 2 weeks ago, cyber is an existential threat to the United States. Existential, not like Jean-Paul Sartre, but our existence is a threat. Those of you in here who have taken an international relations course, or maybe some political science majors here, know what asymmetric warfare is. It's an old concept. Basically, it is the concept that when there is a conflict between a stronger and a weaker opponent, the weaker opponent will use what he or she needs to in order to prevail. We did it right here in the United States. We did it here in Storrs, Connecticut during the Revolution. The American colonies faced the Brits. Who was stronger? The British. The rules of warfare in those days are you formed a square. That was the civilized, accepted way to wage war. And the square marched to the commons in the town. Those in opposition formed their square, marched to the square in the town, faced off against each other, fired their muskets, and saw who was alive afterwards. The Americans were the terrorists. They broke the rules. The writings of the British, they were barbaric. What did they do? They hid behind stone walls. They hid behind trees. And the worst, the most offensive thing of all is they fired at individual soldiers, not at the square. And it goes on, guerrilla warfare and so on. If you today were going to take on the United States, you would not try to combat the United States Navy. But if you had a computer, you could do huge damage against the United States. Asymmetric warfare. The weaker the opponent will find whatever tool, whatever methodology, whatever means it needs in order to prevail. Now, in 1999, there were two colonels in the People's Liberation Army of China who wrote a very famous study. Their challenge was, how could China prevail in a conventional war against the United States, just meaning no nuclear weapons. Take that out of the equation for now. And their conclusion was they couldn't. It would not win unless they weakened the United States domestically, in which case they could prevail. How would they weaken the United States domestically? By shutting down its critical infrastructure. I mean, kind of look what's happened in Puerto Rico right now. I mean, if you were to shut down the provision of gas, water, electricity across the United States, and the military had to be thoroughly engaged in saving lives in the United States, the Chinese postulated and figured out how to do it, they could prevail against us. So when I say that cyber is a weapon, it can be used by itself. It can also be used in conjunction with conventional warfare capabilities. Iran, North Korea, the United States have all used cyber weaponry. We can get into that if you want, but all of us. Today, cyber is a weapon. It's being used. And of course, the plans now are to make cyber warfare an equal branch. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard, cyber warfare. Another point I'd like to leave with you this morning is that offense is easier than defense. Simple as that. It's easy to wage warfare. To protect is extremely difficult in the cyber domain. North Korea has a dedicated force estimated at about 6,000 cyber warriors. These are electrical engineers. These are people who are dedicated to breaking into something. They saw they wanted to get into Sony Pictures, they did. You pick your target and you can go after it. That's very sobering to think of a group of 6,000 engineers dedicated to cybersecurity warfare. China has 180,000 cybersecurity warriors, most of them all engineers. They're parts of the People's Liberation Army. Think what you could do. I mean, suppose you took that 6,000 and divided it into 180. You can go after an awful lot of targets. It's so far, most of it has been stealing for commercial benefit, and we've been trying to control that. But my point is that nations do put assets into the easier part, which is offense. Russia has waged cyber warfare. Estonia in 2007. Estonia today is one of the best cybersecurity defense systems in the world. As part of my work with Connecticut, I was in Estonia, showed them Connecticut's cybersecurity strategic plan. They liked it. They give me a critique of it. They said, yeah, it's kind of what we're doing. How did they get to that point? Well, in 2007, having been independent after World War I and be part of the Soviet Empire, after the Berlin Wall fell, they became independent, decided to move a statue right in the center of Tallinn, the capital, out of town, put it in a military cemetery. Yeah, they appreciated the Russian liberation and all that, but not as a monument right staring them in the face every morning as they had their coffee. The Russians said, don't even think about it. Don't even think about it. 17% of your population is ethnic Russian. Leave that damn statue exactly where it is as a monument. So they moved it. So the Russians fried them. Military, banking, education, commerce, communications, radio, television, the whole bit. They recovered. And they have recovered in a smart way. Estonia now ranks third behind Singapore and Japan in the strength of their K through 12 education system. They're very savvy cybersecurity. My point is, how do you get that way? You realize what the danger is and you defend yourself. The country of Georgia was blinded by the Russians in 2008 before they did a conventional invasion to take out 2 provinces and, in quotes, liberate them. Ukraine. I was in Ukraine last December, again for part of the Connecticut program. They've been attacked 2015, 2016, and again in June. There's an ongoing war there, loss of about 8 to 10 soldiers per week. They're lobbying artillery shells. At the same time they're doing kinetic warfare, they are also engaged in cyber warfare. I just met with my Ukrainian counterpart about 3 weeks ago. You don't have to tell him that cyber is a weapon. He's being attacked all the time. It is part of an ongoing, visceral conflict for the existence of Ukraine. Syria, it's ongoing right now. Cyber, both on its own and as in addition to conventional warfare. Russia also, Russia is a land of remarkable ingenuity and skill in this area. It has what I call cyber mercenaries. These are, the freelancers out there. They cause a lot of problem for people who watch the intelligence come in. They're good, they're creative, they know what they're doing. And they are tolerated by the Russians with one cardinal rule. Go ahead and try to wreak havoc on the Western world. Go ahead and try to make money, but don't ever mess around with your own government. And if you do, you're done. So and sometimes if they need them, there's a whole community there. You can hire them. If a terrorist movement raised, say, $20 million and wanted to do a cyber attack in the United States, you can hire these guys and they do it for you. The only thing is they never turn on the Russians themselves because the Russians know who they are and what they're up to. There's information warfare going on as part of this. Disinformation, propaganda. If we had a map here, I could show you the building in St. Petersburg where there are troll farms today inserting information in the United States. They've tried to disrupt the elections in the United States. They like to discredit Western democracy, like to discredit our economic system. Right now, they are doing propaganda information in the United States on the taking a knee in the NFL. They love it. They love a divided United States. And so you'll do something saying, you know, these bastards are disrespecting our flag, service, veteran, all that, all the good things to say. And who are these people to be taking a knee when I served my country, I did this? On the other hand, they'll send out things from someone else saying, given the injustice, the suffering in our cities, the police mistreatment of certain minorities and so forth, it is in our Constitution to take a knee. They love the fact that they can cause discourse in the United States. They're actively doing it. I mean, I don't, sometimes it's difficult when I meet with business leaders and so forth who really don't care about cyber, who don't know what's going on. My point that offense is easier than defense, when I met with my Ukrainian counterpart a couple of weeks ago, they have been trying hard to increase cyber hygiene, renew your password, dual authentication, increased firewalls, renewed softwares, patches, all you're supposed to be doing. When this new crash override malware was released in June, it knocked them all down. Those who hadn't done a damn thing, they were just carrying on and they were too busy to care about cyber warfare, and those who were doing everything they were supposed to. The virus was that strong that it took them all out. That's the kind of thing that is discouraging. Offense is easier than defense. We also got to look at the penetration platforms. The Internet of Things, billions of easier ways for you to be compromised. They're sold as consumer convenience. We have to recognize that when you can turn down the thermostat in your home or open your garage door or turn on the camera to see your kids coming home from school, you have created more opportunities to be penetrated. We need to consider what that damage is, and we also need all those involved in it to be part of the defense so that we can strengthen our resistance to penetration through the Internet of Things and the industrial Internet of Things. Just yesterday, those of you who follow the trade press on all this stuff, in the United States, there's a defense against machine-to-machine automated threat response. I'll tell you, the acronyms in cyber, I've tried to avoid using them. This is a beautiful one, MMATR, machine-to-machine automated threat response. What it is, some people in uniform here, if you know about the Aegis defense system on a ship, what it is simple. You can shoot down an incoming missile. You can probably shoot down 2 or 3 coming in at the same time. If you had 150 coming in, you can't do it by human activity alone. You need a system which will identify the incoming threats and automatically, a machine running your defense. Now, for Navy captains, this is hard to accept, that I am turning the defense of my ship over to a machine, and I hope it gets all of them. It's the same thing for public utilities. Cyber attack, a lot of them take it very seriously, and they look for threats, and they can take them down. They can take 2 or 3 at the same time. But if you've got 150 cyber attacks coming against your public utility at the same time, you need a machine-to-machine defense. Every time we think we have a good, solid 10-foot wall, somebody builds an 11-foot ladder. And that is the nature of the competition, unfortunately. I don't like it at all. Okay, third point, states have a vital role in defense and recovery. States are penetrated. Some know it, some don't know it. This past year in Lansing, Michigan, public utility, it happens to be the public utility that provides the juice to the state capitol where they're doing legislation, so it did get everybody's attention. They were hit by a ransom, were forced to pay the ransom. Our utilities are in a cat and mouse game all the time, resisting penetration. The other point that why do states have a role is the federal government is not in the first responder business. Your town is, your state is. What is FEMA? FEMA is basically an insurance agency, and there's a willing buyer, a willing seller. They may be able to buy some diesel fuel and send it here. They are not the first responders. The states are. And if we had a cyber attack here in Connecticut, it would be the state of Connecticut, and it would be your town that would be the first people on the ground to try to set things right. We're seeing limits of what the feds can do right now in Puerto Rico. They can go down there and bring in water and food and that sort of thing, but when your infrastructure is limited in its ability to use those resources, you suffer tremendously, which is, of course, what's going on. All right, what should the states do? Fourth point, you need a strategy. Connecticut is in action. We have a strategy. It's on our website, the State of Connecticut website. If anybody has problems, I am arthur.house@ct.gov. Just email me and I'll send it to you. But we have a strategy. It has 7 principles, which we think are applicable to every individual, every organization, every town. And we had 5 areas that we addressed. State government, municipal government, private business, higher education, and law enforcement and security. A very brief note on each of these. We're looking to strengthen our state government cyber defenses. We think they're pretty good. We're doing everything we can. One thing you never do is announce we're pretty good. Announce that you got a good defense. Why? Because we've got a few hackers in this room and some pretty good ones. And all you need is for somebody to say, you know, I kind of think I got my act together over here. Guys like you will prove that that's wrong. But we're doing everything we can because we know there's a threat. We're taking it seriously, doing everything we can to protect the state of Connecticut. Town governments. Town governments in Connecticut have been victims of defense, of fraud. Police departments and fire departments have been penetrated by ransom attacks, and they've had to pay ransom. And that horrifies some people. Don't ever negotiate with a hostage taker. Don't ever pay ransom. Really? You'd like your police department not to be able to respond to calls for 4 weeks? And the cost is $2,000? You'd like your fire department not to be able to go out and respond to emergencies and the cost is $1,800? I mean, the point is, until you are on the line and lives are on the line and you can save lives by spending a couple $1,000s, you tend to be somewhat idealistic and moralistic about it. When it's you on the line, it tends to be worth that money. However, shame on you if you don't then redo your system. And in Connecticut, like other states, we've had people who've paid ransom and didn't fix it. 4 months later, they got shut down again. We have to take this seriously. Private sector. We've just completed a review of our public utilities. We're the first state in the United States to do this. We have a committee of 4 people. 2 of us are in the room here today, both emergency management and public utility representation. And we reviewed how the public utilities are doing using a standard they chose. They all chose the cybersecurity capabilities maturity model, which you probably know as C2M2. The academic world, it's both profoundly vulnerable and it's not producing the cybersecurity graduates that we need. Right now in the United States, there are 350,000 cybersecurity jobs unfilled. Actually announced, we want them. In Connecticut, the announced demand is 4,000, and the actual number is probably much, much greater than that. Our education system in Connecticut is producing less than 1% of 4,000 every year. We've got to do something about this. I mean, the market is not responding to fill the gap. So we've got to look at it. You ask businesses what they want a 2-year associate degree person. They'll teach you what you need to know after that. But I'm just talking about some of the specific challenges. Law enforcement. We need to increase our ability to use the intelligence that's out there. Now, we got an outstanding head of intelligence in the state of Connecticut. I'll embarrass him. His name is Brett Paradise, and he's sitting right there at that table. There's one of them. He needs to be the head of a small department that can thoroughly use all the intelligence that's out there that they could analyze to use. We also need an investigations capability. In Connecticut, you can call the Secret Service, you can call the FBI, but if you're a small business, who do you call? We need a capability in the state police, is by my preference, working with the municipalities so that we can investigate. We can decide how can we go after these people. Recently, there was a hacker in Romania who was arrested and extradited to the United States. So the fact that these guys may be outside the United States is not, it's not an excuse. All right, the fifth point, last, that we need to create and rehearse an emergency response and recovery plan. A cyber attack on New England would present emergency responders with challenges they've never seen before. If you were to cut the gas pipeline, Colonial Pipeline, coming out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, what it would do would be shut down the refinery capacity in New Jersey. Obviously, it would cause a mess in New York City. We're New England, so speaking of New England, half of our electricity here is generated by natural gas. So we would lose fairly quickly half of our electricity generation capacity. It would bring unknown, bring insecurity, the need to manage panic. When a hurricane comes up the coast of the United States, we know what it does. It comes up, hits, goes out to sea, heads out into the North Atlantic. It doesn't decide to turn around and come back and whack us a second or a third time. With cyber attack, we don't know is it there still. Is someone else going to do it? Is it going to strike again? Okay, it faces unusual demands on law and security, maintaining order. It demands immediate and planned communications, because if we had a cyber attack, we could have a communications and propaganda attack as well. The breaking point would be water. After about 2 weeks without electricity, we'd start to lose the ability to purified water, and we'd have to dump sewage into our rivers and lakes. That's the breaking point. Those who have gamed Connecticut say we would lose between 600,000 and 900,000 population. If you can't get water, you leave. You can put an extra blanket on. You can open another can of soup. But if you don't have water, you die. So Connecticut's tackling all of us. They're all cooperating. Utilities are cooperating. We have a strategy. We're working with other countries like Ukraine and the Black Sea countries. It's a serious challenge. So I'll give you the 5 things and turn it back over to my friend. Recognize that the cyber threat we face is serious. Secondly, remember that offense is easier than defense. We're never fully secure. Third, understand that states have the key role in response and recovery. 4, learn about Connecticut's strategy and our action plan. Help to improve them. These drafts are good, and the very next day they're obsolete. They can be made better. People like you can make them better. Let us know about it. Pay attention to the 7 principles we've got in there. Apply them as you like. And think about what you individually, what would you do in the event of a cyber attack? Create your own plan. Tell your family about it. Rehearse it. Know what you would do and how you would respond. I realize I've covered a lot of ground, but you're going to cover an awful lot of more ground. My intention this morning was to throw out some key issues, stimulate the thinking process, and also to thank you, the sponsors, the University of Connecticut, and all of you for showing up for this. This is a modern threat we face, and seeing a room full of people like you taking it on is very reassuring, and I thank you very much for asking me to kick off what I know is going to be a productive day. Thanks very much.
Arthur, thank you very much for kicking off this morning. That was a very nice way to remind us of a sobering reality of cybersecurity. So I invite anyone, if you have questions for Arthur,
sure,
please feel free to ask a quick one or two, and then we'll move on with the program.
Yeah, so go ahead, be the first. It takes bravery. Up there in the back. Good morning. Hang on just a second. You got a mic coming to your hand.
Morning.
Morning, sir.
So, my question for you, since you're talking about offense being easier than defense, is how does that factor into deterrence? Like our traditional military and civil deterrence against other nation states and criminals.
Yeah. You remember in the era of the nuclear weapons, it was called MAD, M-A-D-D, Mutually Assured Deterrence and Destruction. The reason that the Soviets and the Americans, just to simplify things, were NATO and the Warsaw Pact, did not attack each other. It was the other side had thousands of nuclear weapons. And you knew if you got hit, you get hit back. And so there was a deterrence. It's more difficult right now. It is not irrelevant. That theory still does hold. I think that right now, China is not at all interested in a war with the United States. They own $1 trillion worth of US bonds. You really want to cripple the American economy? Russia right now, today, I'm saying, I don't think they're looking to go to war. They'll cause us all the headaches and all the damage they can, but I don't think they're looking at all-out war. What I am worried about today are those cyber mercenaries who can hide all over the place. You can hire them in Minsk, in Kiev, in Moscow, and if you had $20 million, $50 million, if you were ISIS or the Taliban or Al-Qaeda or anybody who had a grievance in the United States, you could hire them. Where did North Korea get the expertise to develop those long-range missiles they're putting in now? They hired them from when the Soviet Union collapsed. And an awful lot of engineers up there, yeah, would you like to come to work for us for a nice, high, attractive salary, especially if you're unemployed? Of course. And they went to Pyongyang and went to work on missiles. There are a lot of these cyber mercenaries working for shadowy groups. That's one reason. And so how do you retaliate against a group which is spread among several different cities, several different countries? And what are you going to do to them? The other thing is attribution is difficult. I know that, but it can be done. When you trace one of these things, and Brett Paradise will tell you this, where did it come from? Oh, it came from Rio de Janeiro. Let's take apart. Let's look at the logs. Sorry, it really came from Johannesburg. And then if you want to really do all the research and put it into it, see, it looks like it came from Brooklyn. I mean, Russia right now has relay systems all over the world that are cutouts. So attribution is difficult. It can be done. But for those reasons, right now, today, I don't see a major power. I get a little nervous when I think about North Korea. But it's the rogue nation and it's the individual cyber mercenary who is capable of doing a national security attack on the United States, in which case the theory of mutually assured destruction does not apply. One more.
Maybe just one really quick one.
Yep. So with breaches like Equifax and, sorry, was that wrong?
Yep. Where are you?
Okay. Over
there
here,
you
sorry.
are. Okay.
So with breaches like Equifax and OPM and things like that, a large number of U.S. citizens losing their identities, especially Social Security numbers. Is it time to start moving towards an alternate means of identification of citizens, maybe changing the way we, one, perform it mechanically, and two, store that information?
Well, you all heard the question. I don't know. I mean, to me, it's like, all right, so you build an 11-foot wall and then somebody's got a 12-foot ladder. Having another one, and how are you going to protect that one if you create a brand new one? I don't see creating a third form of having, say, a national identification number for everyone. We already have one. It's called a Social Security number. I don't see that as practical. It would be a very burdensome, difficult thing to do, and it could probably be hacked as well. So I think the point is we got to take our protection as seriously as we possibly can with what we've got. Just my own personal reaction to it. That's my time. Thank you, sir. Thank you all very much. Yeah.
Hey, good morning.